So this is the continued discussion of the societal impact of OnlyFans, online sex work, real life sex work. I think we'll also include pornography in this discussion as well. The implications of what it means to have these things normalized in society, whether they are going to be normalized, and kind of where we all stand on where our perspectives are and where they're coming from, at least. I don't think we're going to be citing a ton of discussion, studies and data. Not that it's not based on data, but it's more like philosophical, conceptual, sociological discussion, I feel like. Ruby, why don't you give us an introduction of maybe like a little bit of your backstory and also where you stand on these topics?
Sure, sure. Hi, I'm Ruby. I guess you could say I'm like a sex positive feminist. So that means in general I see nothing intrinsically wrong with sex work. But I will acknowledge, like philosophically, I don't see anything intrinsically wrong with it, but there's a lot wrong with the industry as it manifests right now. And I've had experience doing things like stripping, and I've seen the positives and the negatives of the industry, so I kind of have like a pretty nuanced take on that. But yeah, it's interesting stuff to talk about.
Okay, and we also have, we have two other girls joining us this time around. And I thought it's good to have female perspectives on a topic that's predominantly about, well, it's about men too, but I think it's good to have your guys' perspectives as well. We have Amy. So Amy, why don't you give us an introduction for yourself?
Okay, hi, I'm Amy. I have more of a critical perspective, I guess, of...
And she's gone.
Oh no.
You lagged out for a second. Restart.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm also in Australia, which has notoriously terrible internet.
Oh no.
So you'll have to bear with me. Yes, critical perspective of OnlyFans, of sex work, of these kinds of industries, but critical more from a social level, from a macro level, than from individual responsibility level. So I find problems in the commodification at a corporate level of these kinds of experiences, and not the fact that people actually are engaging in this stuff. So, yeah.
Sweet.
I think I agree also, by the way. I'll just, as a brief point of introduction for myself, I more or less, I think, agree with that point of view. And then Shell, how do you prefer to be called? Wonder Shell? Am I saying it?
I guess you can call me Michelle or Michelle, that's fine.
Wonder
Okay, let's just say
Shell.
Michelle.
Okay.
Michelle,
Okay, I'm
you're a little bit quiet, but that's okay. We'll make it work. Tell us, give us an introduction of where you stand and where you're coming from.
So hi guys, this is my first time doing something like this, so thank you for inviting me. I have such a complicated relationship with these things because I definitely see the negative and the positive. I am a cosplayer, so I did notice the rise of OnlyFans in the cosplay community, so I guess I wanted to dig deeper about that and see different perspectives to kind of understand what's going on and the deeper issues that are going on. I personally, with my moral stance, I wouldn't personally do sex work or an OnlyFans, but it's definitely, I could see the positives and negatives, and I'm hoping that throughout our conversations we can unpack a lot more things.
Sweet.
Okay.
Also, Shell, did you want to turn on your video or do you want to just on voice? Because if you click the like video button, that turns that on. I don't know if you want it to or not.
No pressure, by the way. You don't.
No pressure. I just wasn't sure if you, since you're new to it. Yes,
Yeah.
it's up to you. No peer pressure.
So yeah, and I think on the onset of this, I do want to state that it seems like all of our goals are aligned in that we're not here to debate or like style on each other, although that might happen as a consequence of certain points being made. But I think we're here to understand each other and further to the discussion. I think about it critically. So to start off with, Ruby, why do you think? Okay, let's go from here. Do you see that the normalization of these kinds of things is occurring, or do you not think that's occurring? Like, do you think the normalization of sex work as a career path is happening, or no?
I've seen it get gradually less stigmatized, which I view as a net positive in general, because the stigmatization of sex workers is why they face a lot of the issues they do face and are more vulnerable to violence and are often viewed as subhuman. That's why there's a lot of abuse in the industry, because if you think someone's morally defective, you can dehumanize them and justify behaving in, otherwise unjustifiable ways. So for me, I view it as a good thing that it's becoming less stigmatized. It's still judged, but overall women like using their sexuality or being more sexual in public and online, it's become a lot more normalized, which for me as someone who just sees sex as, it is what it is. I don't see it as being like a horrible thing. Whatever an adult wants to do with their own body is, it's cool with me for the most part,
Amy, do you agree with that? Do you disagree with those statements? How do you feel?
Yeah, see, this is where it gets complicated.
Did we lose her?
No, right?
Okay, restart,
Yeah.
restart, Amy, restart.
Sorry. It's not easy to agree or disagree, I think, with someone's personal perspective on this kind of thing. I guess I would come at it more from, I'm seeing a normalization of sexuality. Personally, I think that kind of sexuality is a bit manufactured and maybe not like women's sexuality, but like the internalization of the male gaze and switching that back on itself to feel empowered by it, when at the end of the day it's still, we're not exploring what it means to be sexual and have a sexuality as a female. We're appropriating the male gaze. And
whose phone is going off?
It's recording.
Mine.
Beep, beep.
Turn up. Can you silence your cell phone, please?
Phone's off.
Okay, well, this gets more to the point, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, Amy. Michelle, we'll get your input on this as well. But Ruby, do you see anything wrong on a conceptual level with commodifying sexual feelings?
Commodifying sexual feelings. Well, that's tough to say, because it's like in general, it's bad to commodify any aspect of human life. It's bad to commodify like people, having to use their bodies for hard physical labor or do other dangerous jobs.
Fair enough.
So for me, it doesn't like seem uniquely different in that regard. So when people are like, oh, you're selling your body, you're putting $1 on who you are, it's not that way to me anymore than it is for a construction worker to be like, wow, they're selling their body, like, because for me it's, you're selling a labor, so
but is sex just labor to
do you think that there's like, it goes beyond the commodification of the body and towards the commodification of experience, like the experiences that you're selling, especially as an OnlyFans model? If you're in that industry, you're not just selling your body, you're selling an interpersonal experience. Like, so much of that labor is affective and emotional labor that women are expected to do for free anyway. So again, I guess, I can take your point, but if you reduce human experience to a dollar amount, does that have implications on people's sense of self-worth, on how you have like normal day-to-day relationships?
So let's, if we can, you lagged out for a second there, Amy, but I think your point was made clear.
Yes.
Michelle, I think I've spoken with you, and I think you have an interesting perspective on this, given your situation in your industry with cosplaying. So why don't you share with us what the trends you've seen occur in cosplaying and how that's affected how you view sort of the industry and your role in it.
I guess I have a lot of mixed feelings. Because as a cosplayer, I don't know if it has anything to do with COVID and quarantine that I'm seeing a notice of OnlyFans in the cosplay community, but when I scroll through social media platforms, like I'll often cosplayers promote their OnlyFans, and that's how I noticed OnlyFans, because I haven't, I guess, explored any sort of pornography or sex work in other sort of mediums. So I guess I kind of stumbled upon OnlyFans. I'm like, what is this? Why is this so common now? And it's kind of affected me a little bit, because I'll want to browse for cosplay inspirations, and I often see a sexualized photos or imagery of my cosplay peers, and I don't think that's really for me when I'm looking at content. So it does kind of affect me in a way that I internalize it, and I think, oh, is my worth as a woman only as good as like how good looking I am or how good I pose my body? And it definitely has me, I don't know, conflicted and strained, because I'm all for women, embracing their femininity and sexuality, but when it becomes when it's everywhere and you see this imagery all the time, like my boss even connected with me. I told you, Link, that he was browsing off Kijiji to find a kitten, and
the kitten.
It
The
was
kitten.
for OnlyFans account. So it's like you can't even browse for kittens on Kijiji, because I don't know, it's just everywhere. So
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, Ruby,
Could
you
you
had
clarify that for
had people making.
the audience? What's the deal with your boss? He was looking for a kitten on some. I don't even know what Kijiji is.
Maybe did he Google like
It's Gumtree.
pussy?
What do you have, like Craigslist?
No.
Is that what you have in America?
Craigslist?
Oh
Okay.
yeah.
he was looking for white kittens to adopt, and he put white kitten, and he clicked the image, and it did look like a white kitten, but it was bait for an OnlyFans account for.
So it was a
selling
promotion.
her
It was an advertisement.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So-
gotcha.
Like a Rickroll, but in 2020 with OnlyFans accounts.
So
Sick.
yeah, I'm definitely seeing it everywhere, and I don't know, like as a woman, I don't want to, like I often think, should I spend this much time worrying about how I look? I guess going through Instagram, you always see advertisements for like fillers and work, and like I kind of feel sad to think that maybe a lot of women are stressing about the way that they look, maybe for their OnlyFans or the sort of industry to look good. To, personally, what I think is it seems like a short-term like feelings of empowerment, but maybe the long-term effects of these sort of just being a part of OnlyFans in this industry seem to be they have more negative consequences. What do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think what we're describing is like it's first off, it's the way capitalism uses the lowest common denominator to sell anything. So we're on the internet, and people will click what appeals to their lizard brain, and a lot of times that's sex. People are obsessed with sex. They click it, it sells, and yes, that's problematic because of how prevalent it is and how lopsided it is. Of like, all right, here's like an 18-year-old girl, like being portrayed in a certain way. When I see there's nothing wrong with being sexy, but the fact that there's only one specific kind of sexiness that's shown and glorified, like that's an issue. But I see that also as like a broader cultural issue, and it can manifest like as a microcosm in sites like OnlyFans and stuff. But that I feel like that's like a broader conversation with like the newer beauty standards that are like coming out with like Instagram and fillers and all these things are just rapidly becoming normal. So I see those as like a broader issue, but I don't see them. It's like a broader issue that manifests in every aspect of life, you know? So it's going to manifest in porn and OnlyFans. And I kind of view that kind of sexiness as like, think of it as like sugar, you know? It's like the corporations like sell you sugar, they get you addicted to sugar, and they definitely exploit that, you know, when in moderation it can be fine, if you know what I'm saying.
So really quickly, I want to let Amy jump in on that. But so, I mean, it almost sounds to me like you agree, but you feel like the scope of things are too big to fully address, Ruby. Like, it sounds like in an ideal world, you wouldn't have these things being commodified or reduced down to their market value, but you feel like that's inevitable on some level or something?
Well, I mean, it is like inevitable on some level, but I don't think that we can't talk. I think it's important to view it as a broader scale, because when you laser focus in on the most vulnerable people who are experiencing this, which is sex workers, you know, we could talk about the broader issue, but when you act like it's an issue that sex workers have, and sex workers alone, when they're already a stigmatized group.
What issue? That's like an issue that they're in the
so
industry?
that like the issue. Well, I don't see it being in the industry itself as an issue, but like the way that, you know, certain beauty standards or certain kind of sexuality is like overwhelmingly depicted, and how that makes other women feel, you know. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's not the problem or the fault of sex workers that there's a beauty standard.
Yeah.
But like to
But
Michelle's
to be
point,
profitable as sex worker.
We lost her.
Yeah.
you always lag for a second when you start talking, and then you're back to normal.
I think
know.
I'm gonna reconnect to this on my laptop, because I think I've got much better connection than my desktop. Is that okay? Can
That's
I do
fine.
that?
That's fine.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll be back in 1 sec.
All right.
So let me. Okay, so I think Michelle's point though is that she doesn't want anything to do with the sex industry, sex work, promoting herself in that way, and yet it sounds like because of her peers turning to OnlyFans, even in her community, it's almost uncomfortably pressuring her now to number one, question what her role is in this community, and also question what this community is all about. Like, what do you think about that though?
I mean, it is an issue, like with cosplaying, that it is the cosplayers that get the most attention are the hot, sexy ones. You know, that's like, that, you know, that's just how. I'm not like, it's not ideal. Like, obviously, like, it should be more of a focus on like your creativity or other aspects. But when you're online, you know, that's just the kind of shit that like rises to the forefront. You know, so you have to kind of dig deeper to, I don't know, maybe find people
Meaning.
who aren't necessarily using the sexual aspect of it. If you know what I mean?
Okay, so yes, I totally know what you mean. And I would say what you're describing is a descriptive thing. It's like, in other words, like you're right. The internet, let's say, will show only the most visually appealing. It's whatever's the most easy to digest is obviously the most marketable, you know, on some level, especially when it comes to the internet. And so you're right, like when there are these cosplay girls who are super sexualizing themselves, just as an example, men are drawn to that because men who are predominantly, you know, visually stimulated, they're going to be drawn to that, and those girls are going to get more money, more followers, they're going to get rewarded for showing that. And that's just, it's like, I feel like what that's doing is it's showing that you can't just openly, freely have this stuff everywhere, because it's going, like you said, it's going to reduce people to the lowest common denominator. Like, maybe in a sense, the worst part about men is highlighted in that they're just visually stimulated, you know, and women think that's all men are, which is not, but that gets highlighted, that gets rewarded, that gets promoted. Do you see how that's like perpetuating the worst parts of, like, women are not just sexual objects and men are not just like sex hungry beasts, and yet both of these things are being promoted as a consequence of the environment that we've shaped with the internet.
Yeah.
So
Well,
I
I
feel,
would say,
yeah, go on.
well, I'd say in a way, honestly, I feel like some of these Kim sites, they're actually less objectifying than traditional porn or prostitution because it's about building a connection with like another human being, even if that can manifest in like problematic, exploitative ways. I feel like it actually does, I don't see it as purely like objectifying. It's obviously there's like, the element to it, but that's more like what I see broader in porn, but with like sites where it's more like connection based, it seems, like a different thing going on. And then also, these are patterns we see replicated all over the internet, like the way that our news outlets work. It's like whatever's outrageous is what, our algorithm gives us, whatever pushes our buttons.
Yeah.
So again, I just feel like I just don't see that as being something that's unique to people in the sex industry, aside from the fact that like sex across many industries is like used to sell, products and used to manipulate, the masses.
Well, whether it's unique or not is a, I believe they call it a descriptive claim. Like that doesn't have anything to do with what we should or shouldn't do. In other words, Michelle, do you want to weigh in on anything we've touched on?
I don't know. I don't have anything to.
Okay, that's.
I agree with both too, though it's definitely a complicated thing. 'Cause
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
think sex work is entirely bad, right? In some cases, beneficial, but I do think it's. I don't know. From what I've read and studied in my university career, I noticed that, well, at least some, like sex work is often more about the emotional labor, is it not? Rather than the physical.
That's true.
In the newer industries of like webcam modeling and sites like OnlyFans, it's 1,000,000%. It's not just about the sex, because you can get free porn anywhere. It's about like a personalized live experience, interacting with someone, having your own kind of like, super, personalized experience or whatever.
So is it okay for you, I guess, sell that intimacy though?
Would you say, like, say I have a therapist I see once a week. Would you say that she's exploiting me because I pay to get emotional support and insight from her?
No, but she went to school for that though, right?
And your therapist isn't your like romantic interest.
Yeah.
It's not like a perfect analogy, but I'm just saying like as an analogy of like someone putting like a price on some type of like emotional labor. I can't think of like a more
if I
close
can,
analogy because it is different,
if I can interject there, actually, you make a good point with the therapist thing. I think, but at the same time, I would actually still be consistent and say it would be a bad thing if the only way people can get help in society, which maybe that is how things are shaping up to be now, is through paying a therapist $100 every session. Like that should be a tool in our arsenal, I suppose. And I think it definitely, a therapist can be very life-changing, of course. But I also think there's a problem with the mentality of, my friend, blah, 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 he needs to just go get help. Like, and that's it. Just go pay a therapist and they'll fix your life. It's like, okay, but
Oh yeah, it's a joke.
yeah, like your friends should care about you too. Not that they're therapists, but
Yeah.
we've all had friends who've helped us through difficult times, and that's important too.
Yeah.
So
I think that
Yeah, go-
the
go ahead.
therapist is going to be able to do work that your friends absolutely cannot do. Like speaking to someone who has absolutely no grasp or understanding of who you are and what you get up to in your day-to-day life is like far easier to do sometimes than speaking to someone who already has preconceived ideas about how you should act, what you're into. Like it's because you took lots of drugs last weekend that you feel so bad. It's not, maybe some other things.
Yeah.
There's like, yeah. So I would disagree there, but that's not really on topic.
Well, really quickly though, here's a personal experience. I know somebody who has a lot of issues in their life, a lot of emotional issues, let's just say, and they are completely averse to the idea of getting help from a therapist or talking to a therapist because to them, it's absolutely horrible that they have to pay someone to talk to them. That's the way they view it.
Yeah.
Whether you think it's
Yeah.
flawed or not, that's part of people's experience too. They think the idea of paying
Oh my
someone
God,
to talk to you is so
absolutely.
degrading, and so it feels like you're worthless to them. Not saying I would feel that way.
I think that a lot of people go through that before they get help too.
Sure.
I think that you go through going like, okay, what the hell? Why am I like this? You know, I don't need help. I don't need these
Yeah.
antidepressants. I don't need that therapy. Like, I should just fucking figure it out. My life isn't that bad, you know, but
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is, and to be consistent for Ruby's points, is that I am against commodifying a lot of things, especially I don't think we should make every single thing a transactional based prescription. Like, oh, you have depression, take this and talk to a therapist for 5 weeks and you're cured. Like, that's not, again, and there's a function for that in society. And Ruby, like, when you're talking about labor and such compared to sex work, labor to an extent, it's about where you draw the line. Like, do you ever draw the line, or is everything up for commodification? That's a question to you.
Well, because it's not a line I personally, I draw the line of what I'm comfortable with in my life, and I could talk about like, because a lot of these issues too, it's kind of more of like a critique of like capitalism and, how that operates, so that can, make it seem reductive and commodifying. But overall, it's a personal choice where someone draws the line of what they're comfortable. Like for me, I was comfortable being a stripper, but I was not comfortable being a prostitute. For me, that's my personal line. But if someone else did it, I wouldn't, judge them for it. Does that make sense?
yeah.
It makes sense. Although I don't think you can lay everything at the feet of capitalism, because if you have a society that is economically capitalist, but let's say has some sort of social fabric and moral standards, let's say, or ethics that would keep certain things. In other words, the market only has as much power as we're willing to give it. So it's like in other words, capitalism or any sort of market forces at play, they only have complete power over us if we don't think that there's a point where we should draw a line where things should and shouldn't be commodified. Do you get what I'm saying?
It may be, but I think that you are underplaying the social and cultural implications of an economic system. Like, that shit goes deep and runs deep, so deep into ourselves, we don't even see it. Like, we can't even pinpoint and recognize our own role in reproducing the society that we're a part of. Like, so the rampant individualism is a byproduct of 1980s neoliberal globalized policy, upward mobility, like rhetoric of aspiration, pull yourself up by your bootstraps, it's your fault if you're not successful, all of this kind of stuff. Like, we have internalized this really dramatically. And I think the entrepreneurial expectation of young women is super highlighted in OnlyFans. Like, well, why would you be a waitress when you can earn $15,000 a month just by showing some random dudes on the internet your tits and sending them text messages? Like, why would you not do that?
Yeah. So therefore, it's going to get
That is the
normalized.
question.
Yes,
But
exactly.
that's a great point too, because it is like, we could talk about like an economic system like it's separate, but it definitely does impact you. And even the way people construct their identities is around like what they purchase, the clothes they wear,
Absolutely, yeah.
So it's they're very like intertwined. So it is like, it's hard to, that was a
Do
good
you
point.
think the women that choose to do this type of work, though, is just playing with the system that already exists? So kind of like a sort of cynicism or dark humor, like, well, it's not good if I'm a waitress somewhere, but I can rank my way to the top if I just show my tits and that's it. But my question is, if you have this sort of attitude, though, like, will you be happy long term, or is that not even the question? Is it just a means to get money? Is it do women have a sort of satisfaction or happiness when they pursue this type of work? Is it, because I can see that it can be very tempting. For example, let's say if you're an 18-year-old girl that has a shitty family and wants to leave her house but can't, sees OnlyFans, sees, see how fast you can get some money and some independence, and just kind of, I guess, work towards your independence per se. I guess I would love to hear any of your comments about that, really.
Ruby.
Oh yeah. So
Or any of you. It doesn't have to
So-
be Ruby.
I want to hear
well,
Ruby's
I would
thoughts.
say with that, it depends on the individual why they're going in the industry. Like there's people who are, a small minority. There's a small minority of sex workers who are just like, I'm horny fucking bitch. This is my passion. This is what I want to do. That exists. Very small minority. And then I think there's another minority that's like, this is like a job. Sometimes it's fun. Sometimes it sucks. Then there's another minority that's just like completely ambivalent. And then, a large chunk where it's like, I don't fully enjoy this, but this is a job. I don't fully enjoy waitressing. I don't fully enjoy working at a laundromat. I like can enjoy this like a little more. It's like the best of, some shitty options.
Do you
So there's like a varying degree of like happiness levels in the industry, if you know what I mean.
But do you think there's a difference between the toll it takes on someone to be a waitress and what's being, let's say, made transactional there, like your time, your labor, these kinds of things, versus something like, let's not even just say full-on sex. Let's just say it's like, let's go to OnlyFans,
Yeah.
which is like you're revealing your body, you're revealing parts of your body that you probably wouldn't be comfortable just showing anybody, that you don't know very well. Like naturally, you're just don't. It's a more intimate feeling being made transactional. It's a more intimate part of you being made transactional versus being a waitress. Do you see the difference there?
I think it's going to be more psychologically draining to do, especially web-based sex work, because you don't, like, you come home from a day of waitressing and everyone has been a total asshole, but you go home and then you're home and you can leave it all behind. You can see your friends, you can do your thing, like social media, whatever. It's not, when it is all on your phone, it's constant. You're working 24/7. You don't have time off. Regardless of the job you're doing, that's going to be psychologically exhausting. But if it's all effective labor, it's all emotional labor for other people. You're putting yourself in a really vulnerable position. You're wondering like, oh, will I ever get a boyfriend who will respect the fact that the internet can just see me naked? Like all of these things are going to be putting, I think it would be a massive toll on young women, especially when sorry.
I was going to say, because I have industry, like I worked in the restaurant industry for 10 years. I've had like a bunch of jobs in that industry. And for me, the real tragedy was having to work 70 hours a week of my precious finite life, not be able to spend time with like my family or be there for them. Just wake up, go to work. I'm exhausted. Customers treat you like minimum wage, like shit, total, so that for me, but you're right on like when you're working as like, anyone who works online, there's that element even like for YouTubers of like, it doesn't end, so like it's draining in like a different way, and it is definitely, it's isolating because you're removed from like the traditional workforce. So there is like there is a big level of alienation. That's like, there's the pros and cons to it, and there's a lot of cons, and a lot of it is alienation, isolation, like just almost like a distortion of like your personality, because you're like, becoming this persona that could like kind of fracture your like ego,
totally
have like, weird impacts like that. So
and I think there's a really important, I'm so sorry, Shell, I just really want to quickly say this, that there's a really important distinction to be made here between working in the service industry in America and working in the service industry in Australia, because not even the same. We don't work for tips. We get like $25+ an hour generally if you're, on the books. You can make a living. Yeah, you can make a living out of the service industry in Australia. So let's just want to clarify that.
Whoa.
Culturally, really significant differences there.
I work for $2 an hour at one restaurant. I swear to God, they were horrible. And I worked there till 4 a.m. every night. It was such a shit show. They were like super scummy.
Michelle, you were gonna say something?
I have a few thoughts. I guess a series of questions. One being, what do you think, like more clearly, why do you think women gravitate towards sex work? And I guess just another like thought, if there was more options for women to achieve success financially, etc., like other sort of versions of success, do you think sex work would still be on the rise? Because part of me thinks if there was a lot more options that were visible and attainable, maybe women wouldn't see the appeal as much for sex work.
I can,
Does that
yeah.
make sense?
So you're saying like
Yeah,
it's
totally.
a last
And
resort, and it should, like, if there was more options, it wouldn't be taken as much, right? Is that kind of what you're
I
saying?
mean, I would say it's kind of like a
I
best
would say-
resort, you know, out of
It's
the
a-
options
it's a
available,
tempting-
you know.
It's a tempting resort, but
Yeah. Yeah, I would
think
say that's like the angle with that is that because, you know, there's several ways, like if you're someone who's interested in reducing the amount of sex work in that industry, like the way that I would view a better way to go about that is to, you know, emphasize creating more positive opportunities for like young women, you know, and having more like role models in those industries, having like free education in the US so we don't have to work on OnlyFans to pay for our college or our medical bills, which is what a lot of models do, you know.
Oh shit.
So yeah, yeah.
It's okay.
Oh.
Just go on.
Did we lose? Oh no, that was
No, she's
pretty
back.
much it.
Okay. But okay, to get to like I think the crux of the waitress analogy, Ruby, do you see a it sounds to me like you don't see a distinction in the labor involved with being a waitress versus being some type of sex worker. Is that true?
It's definitely different, but they each have their own. Like for me, being a waitress, the most exhausting was like the emotional, constant like abuse. You know, a lot of restaurants, it's extremely psychologically traumatizing to be treated subhuman. So it's interesting because, you know, you could go be a dominatrix on OnlyFans and get showered with money for people to worship you, you know? So it's just so that I guess it really depends on like the situation, because not every restaurant's like that, and not every OnlyFans is like that. Most people don't make it. It's a very fickle, you know, like industry too. So that's like a whole other can of worms. Yeah,
I think Shell's point about like visible and attainable options for young women versus like just getting into sex work, I think it comes back to this entrepreneurial spirit of the, you know, contemporary woman. It's much easier and quicker and, you know, sort of more simple to get into the sex work industry as opposed to pursuing a university education, whatever it is. Again, cultural difference here because we don't pay upfront for university in Australia. The government covers it and we eventually pay that money back. So yeah, like it's...
Your taxes are also...
I mean, we could talk all day about the cultural differences between Australia and America, but I think that it's like it's a quick and easy thing to get ahead, or like there's a myth of universal potential success that all women who show their bodies on the internet will get ahead, which just isn't true. But I think there is a real problem that when you are spent, let's say, once you pass your prime and you've just been doing this and you haven't worked on attaining any other skills or any education or whatever, then what happens? Like, I think that's really concerning. And there should be pathways out. Like, I think we should support sex workers in what they do, but also offer pathways out for women who maybe have been forced into it or by their circumstances or, you know, whatever it is. Yeah, like what do you do when you're 50?
Yeah, it's
Probably
definitely
not making lots of
just
money.
like it's similar. I mean, it's not identical, but it's similar to like women who aspire to be like a runway model or something. It's like
Totally.
they have to be educated on like A, well, this is also a very exploitative industry. B, it's temporary, it's fleeting, and you're probably not going to succeed at it. But if
Like-
you're smart, you can like do it and use it as a stepping stone to build something else. And that's the best of sex work would be used as a tool and like a stepping stone, and not like I want to be like on OnlyFans for the rest of my life, because that just doesn't, unless you like
not
save a lot of
practical.
money, if there's chicks who retire, at 30 because they're loaded, but
Yeah.
not most people don't do that,
And an analogy you could make for men in masculinity is men in competitive sports.
Yeah, exactly.
It's basically like the Colosseum of the modern day. Acquired brain injuries, like all the stuff. You're done. You're kicked out by 27, 30. Then what the fuck do you have? You have no education. You have brain damage. You have like no understanding of how to spend or save your money. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Yeah.
But I think there's something unique about commodifying feelings that arise from interpersonal and intimate relationships. I think there's a unique value there. And I think just comparing it to any other industry and saying, well, it has its ups and downs like any other industry is not an apt comparison if you value the feelings associated with intimacy more than you value, your physical strength or your, more surface level type things.
Yeah.
Ruby, do you value, I guess this goes to all of you actually, do you value the feelings of intimacy in a higher regard than you would the feelings of exerting your body, exercising, or, those kinds of things? Like, do you have a special value for that? You personally?
Yeah. I mean, I do, of course. But my whole thing is I very much believe in, like, I ascribe my own meaning to things that are meaningful to me, and I create my own purpose in life, but I don't, project or judge others. And also, I don't think it's mutually exclusive. I think you can very much, value, like when I was a dancer, like I wasn't great at it, but a lot of it was I would just end up talking to people for a long time who were lonely, and even though there was a business aspect to it, doesn't mean our interactions weren't genuine. There was like a fleeting human connection there, even if it was paid for. And that wouldn't mean that necessarily, like, in my real life, I'm, somehow unable to still have those connections, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, but here's where I take issue with that. You're saying I have these personal beliefs and I've derived this meaning for myself. But two things. One, if you think that you or people in general have no role in saying what is moral or not, then the end result is that everything will be commodified and reduced to its market value, for one, let alone who knows what other societal implications there are. But but more to the point, like the way you, I'm trying to figure out how to explain this. So you probably feel like sex is important or meaningful or special to you for a very obvious reason, that you physically, inside of you, mentally, psychologically, you feel these things. You know what I mean? Like when you're in love with someone, you feel that, right? Like that's a real experience that you've experienced.
Yes.
Everyone is capable of experiencing that, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if everyone's capable of experiencing that, and your experience is representative of, it's not exactly the same, but it's like when you cry, it's probably not so different than when someone else cries. When you're angry, it's a similar emotion. So,
but I distinguish between like casual sex and like love. I think there's like a huge gradient of different experiences, and it's like, it's universal that, I'd say most people, they like being in love and having meaningful relationships and sex. But, those same people at points in their life could just want to fuck, or jerk off or something without thinking about it.
But are we promoting more of the just want to fuck, just want to jerk off, superficial, casual relationships by making that such a normalized thing that you could just pay a transaction for? It's like, in other words, you're conditioning people to view it as this casual transactional thing when that is becoming the normal avenue for making money as a girl or something, or a more normal avenue. Do you get what I mean? Like people are conditioned to view it that way against what you and I would consider your natural feelings of when you're when you're having sex with someone, or when you want to have sex with someone. It's like there is something special about that. And you agree. You feel the same.
I guess
always.
yeah, it's
Not always,
not-
but it's
not
not the
always,
point that
no.
it's not always or not. I'm saying by making it more, by normalizing the transactional exchanges, you
Yeah.
are promoting the more casual, superficial.
See, I don't know if is that really how it happens. Like, I have no experience of OnlyFans other than what I've read and watched about it. Like, I have don't even know what the app would look like. But I feel like, isn't there sort of all these people are going to be paying this woman for access to photographs and maybe to chat with her? And I feel like there is maybe more, it creates this one-sidedness where she is servicing a whole bunch of clients, and that guy who's paying her is like sort of fantasizing about being the only one that she's talking to. So he's
Yeah.
maybe fallen in love with the idea, which is important, the idea of this woman who is always there and always wants to listen and never cries and never gets upset and is always beautiful and is always hot and is never in her sweatpants eating fucking nachos off her stomach watching trash TV. Like, that she's not that woman. What she is this perfect fucking woman.
Yeah.
And he's in love with that. So try and then take, if from 12 years old, 15 years old, that's all you're exposed to, that's how you're getting this intimacy. I think that's where the issue is that for women, it is just a transaction. For the women doing it, it's just work. I'm just doing what I need to do to work. For the men who are the clients, maybe that's where the issue is stemming from. And maybe that'll make it really hard for them to pursue meaningful relationships in real life with real women who are flawed and fart and don't look beautiful all the time.
That's an aspect of it too, for sure.
Yeah, I think there's a certain demographic of men, especially right now, you're seeing like a lot of isolated, lost young men. So they're the ones who are vulnerable to getting sucked into the more toxic aspects of that, where they are seeing it for something it's not. Because I know a lot of men know exactly, this is a transaction, or even if it is a transaction, doesn't mean it's like entirely fake. Like, say if someone is, so like on OnlyFans, you make like sexy videos, or you like jerk off in a video, and like people can request it, but it doesn't, I don't know. I lost my train of thought. I forget.
Let me turn on the light so I look like less of an incel.
I know, yeah. Like, it's scary. But, oh yeah, so I would say that, like, we need to create kind of like a newer identity for men, like, in general, because there is this lonely aspect of men, but, like, at least in my life, in the men I know, none of that, like, I know men who, like, watch porn or, like, go to campsites, but it doesn't seem to impact them in the same way that it impacts other men. It's kind of like addiction, where you could be predisposed to having a problematic relationship with something that someone else could, do just fine with. And, porn very much is in that arena, in my opinion.
But maybe the issue is not people like us who have had exposure to both like pre-internet life. Remember when there wasn't the internet? You weren't on
the
there.
last. Yeah.
Yeah, showing my age, but people who have literally it's been around since they were born. People who were born in 2000 are 20 now. Year 2000.
That's crazy.
Are 20. Like, they have not been off the internet, and I think that's the demographic that all of these issues are the most pertinent for, because we still have some sense of reality outside of the internet naturally sort of built into us because we've experienced it. But yeah, I think if I really, really am concerned about young men and young women and their relationship to sex, their relationship to their bodies, to their sense of self-worth being built around an exchange, a monetary exchange. All of these things I think have, I mean, we're not going to see the real effects of them for probably another couple of years, but yeah.
So to that point,
especially porn.
To that point, I think you make a good point, which is right now it's like we're, if you want to call this, we're like in the eye of the storm, I feel like, because I think there's very valid reasons to say people who grew up, even in my generation, people who grew up in the generation before me, whatever, people born, in 1990 or earlier, 95 or earlier, this is probably not as much of an issue for them. But what I see, and I guess I have some experience with this as well, and certainly a lot of my friends do, and people I know, people on Discord, people in the stream even, I'm sure. If you're growing up as a guy, maybe you're not the most popular in school. Maybe you don't have the most friends. Maybe you don't do well you don't have a ton of girlfriends in high school or something. Most guys don't, okay? Like a very small percentage of guys are just so great with women and relationships.
Yeah. Super chads.
Yeah.
Giga chad.
Same for women.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
For women.
I was asked out as a joke in front of the class. I dropped out of school. I did not do well in that department.
So.
Not to say.
Go on.
Yeah. Not to derail. Sorry.
No, okay.
No, you go.
So.
No. Yeah. I apologize. Yeah.
So you're right. And obviously not every woman is like this, but I think there's something to be said about women are pursued by men. Like if you're an attractive girl, you can be pretty antisocial and you'll probably still get some guys like hitting on you, asking you out. If you're not socially successful as a guy, even if you're like slightly better than average looking, you're still going to have really difficult time getting with women. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what something like OnlyFans does, for example, is it essentially highlights the market, raises the market value of women and lowers the market value, sexual market value, whatever you want to call it. Let's just say market value of men. And that just stands to reason. If you're paying for the time and attention of a girl, paying to see a girl's pictures monthly, you're paying for her time. You're paying for who she is. Okay, you're not even paying for necessarily a service from her. You're paying for her time, her messages, her pictures. The market value of women is now higher, and the market value of men is now lower. Now you might say, well, men are willingly paying for that, and women are willingly doing that. And you're like, yes, that's true. But if this phenomenon is increasing due to whatever host of factors, that is the end result of what's happening. Does that make sense?
I would say I don't. It kind of seems like you think this is gonna like grow into this like thing that is like every male-female interaction is all of a sudden like every bitch wants to be on OnlyFans and like every dude only, I see this like throughout history it's been generally like a minority of the population who's like sex workers. So I don't think destigmatizing it is going to have like some huge spike. Like, I mean, I'm sure some people will be more comfortable who might not have otherwise been comfortable. But I don't see like sex worker OnlyFans as being the thing that's really damaging male-female relationships right now. I think, it can be an aspect, but it's just such a minority of, and also we're being super heteronormative. There are dudes on fucking OnlyFans,
of course,
trans, non-binary,
yeah, sure.
But yeah, it is overwhelmingly
ladies.
Okay, but Ruby, to your point, because I want to stick on this, you're saying normalizing it, removing the stigma won't have any impact on the number of women that do it. I would say to that, then what would possibly be keeping the women from doing it if there's no stigma and there's no, like in other words, if it's just lucrative, if there's all these incentives to do it, it's lucrative, you could do it from the comfort of your home, you have a ton of fans and followers, and you don't have to actually go get a job or education. There's all these incentives lined up. And you're saying we should also remove the stigma. And I'm saying, well, it stands to reason that by removing the stigma, all of these incentives, there's going to be nothing stopping an increase. And we have seen an increase actually as well. Specifically with OnlyFans, I don't know if there's data on like the totality of online sex work, although again, like that is pretty self-evident that that's increased as the internet and the users of the internet have also increased. So what I'm saying is when you remove that stigma, you're removing the last barrier of entry. What is stopping, in other words, what is stopping women from...
Do you think every little girl is like, oh man, like if there's no stigma, I would love to fucking jerk off on cam, like if say
Not
the roles are
explicitly.
reversed, say like you're a guy,
Yeah.
and if all of a sudden it's destigmatized for you to jerk off on cam, and that's like how you make your money, do you think every... Well, actually, maybe that's not a good
Well,
analogy.
there's no demand for that. There's no
Do you think
demand for
every
that.
in a parallel universe where there's big demand for it,
Yeah.
you know, but that's not a good analogy because maybe every guy then would want to do that. But the thing is, even if everyone wants to do it, you can't. That's not how the market works.
That's true.
Everyone can't. There's a limited. It sifts itself out because it's kind of like people who want to be an influencer. You know, it's kind of like the same vibe of like, you know.
Okay,
it's,
I'm glad you're saying that. Okay, hold on.
You know.
This is perfect. You're right. You're totally right. There's a point where it becomes oversaturated in the market. There's only so much.
It already is.
Sure. But the thing is, the demand is, as long as men are sexually attracted to women, the demand is always going to be there. Just like
Yeah.
there can be, let's say there's only 1,000 Hollywood actors who can be famous and relevant and making a ton of money, like in the top echelon, right? And after that, it gets oversaturated and it just doesn't work, right? In that same vein, though, of those 1,000 Hollywood actors, there can be 100 million, 2 billion people who watch them. So in other words, there's the end point for, you're right, there's a certain end point of oversaturation for the amount of women that can be doing this as a lucrative career path. You're absolutely right. The demand in terms of men has a much higher ceiling.
So you're really
that-
talking about
yeah.
removing the stigma, like you're taking issue with Ruby's perspective that the stigma on women to be sex workers should be removed because, you know, it's going to create like, it's just lucrative, there's no barriers to entry, blah, blah, blah. But what about reframe this as like, should we not be intensifying the stigma on men who are consuming pornography and using these services? Like, that's a totally normal thing. People wear fucking Pornhub t-shirts in public. It's like, oh, Pornhub, yeah, love Pornhub, love watching porn. Porn's the best. Like, why are we not re-stigmatizing the consumption of erotic material rather than calling out the women who are doing this for money?
Because they're part
Like,
of the same
you
coin.
can't, yeah, they're not really though.
Well,
They
you were
are.
just saying because there's a limited amount of women who are doing it, but it's like, you know, the amount of men doing it is much more. So wouldn't it make sense to like try
If
to
there was
create a
no
new
market,
social?
they wouldn't
You know.
be, women wouldn't
But
be
one of
selling
them, you're,
themselves.
but,
Yeah.
okay, but in one case, this is
Also,
like,
I don't think you should shame men or women.
No, I agree.
No,
I agree.
I'm just
That's-
trying
This
to revert.
Yeah,
That's
no,
a
I-
granted.
This is totally
I know.
That's a granted.
hypothetical.
That's a granted.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yes, but at the same time, it's like, again, it's a baseline. I'm assuming we all agree, as this is like a baseline biological fact, that men are sexually aroused, especially
Men
the-
also have imaginations.
Sure, of course they do. Men are sexually. We agree that women have a higher market value than men. Yes or no?
And like a younger woman tends to have more sexual marketplace value. You
Yeah.
know, like
Okay,
during
yeah.
her like
Yeah.
fertile prime. You know,
Okay.
like there's
While
the-
your breasts are still perky and you don't have a beer belly and you are
So
you know.
short of somehow like rewiring that entire hierarchical system, which we've established is that women have naturally, an average looking woman has naturally more options, generally speaking, than an average looking man. Do we establish that?
up to a certain
well, it
age
depends
in a
on-
very closed
yeah.
environment.
Sure. Yes.
50-year-old men have a much higher market value than 50-year-old women.
Okay. Let's
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
fixate on a
Yeah. So we got a demographic.
developmental
This is
years,
just-
young adulthood. I would say the times when people usually find partners, usually get into careers. This is the most important time, not like 50 plus. Not that they're irrelevant, but their careers, their lives, their relationships are already established at that point. Okay, mostly. So what am I getting at? So okay, what I'm trying to say is that you're viewing this backwards. You're like saying, well, men should just not act on their instinctive desire to get aroused when they see women like this, and they should
I'm not
just
saying should, but yeah.
yeah, like I mean, and in a certain way, I agree with you. Like again, this is a matter of individual responsibility versus societal issues. Like as an individual level, again, like if there's a guy in the chat or someone who's talking to me who's like, dude, I subscribe to 10 OnlyFans accounts and I'm addicted and I jerk off every night. I'm not going to say the solution to that is that society needs to reform its stance on OnlyFans and on jerking off.
That's obscene.
That's not a prescriptive solution, obviously, for sure. But what I'm saying is it's both. You can't just say women should be promoted as doing online sex work everywhere. That's completely normal. It's completely okay. And I'm not talking about from a legal point of view, by the way. I'm talking from like a
Yeah.
And men should just pull themselves up from their bootstraps, and like that's the bootstraps argument. First, that doesn't work at a societal level. That works at an individual level, which I agree with you.
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I don't think that is what should happen, but to put into perspective the argument against destigmatization, you have to look at it from both sides. Like you're saying, like, okay, that is sort of just as obscene as saying that men shouldn't watch porn. Like saying there should be a stigma of women entering into sex work is just as absurd as saying there should be a stigma against consuming erotic material. You know, it's not the answer to the problem. It doesn't just work like that. Because regardless of the stigma, it's still going to happen.
Well, yeah. That's like, yeah.
Well, yes, but we keep saying the stigma like it's this like invisible force. I mean, I guess what it really comes down to is, this is going to get maybe philosophical, but it comes down to whether or not you think things have intrinsic value or meaning or not. I think that's what it comes down to at the end of the day.
That's like anytime I have a political debate, at some point it just hits this wall of like that's why in our last one I asked if you're religious, not to be like if you're religious nothing you say makes sense, but when I'm talking to someone who's religious, they're coming from a whole different like moral perspective, you know, from someone like me who's like an atheist and like a materialist, like a humanist, you know. So it does, like for me, I don't think there is intrinsic value. I think for value to exist, there has to be someone valuing it. You know what I mean? So that's why people tend to create their own, you know, value. Are you religious? I forgot if I ever got.
I believe in intrinsic value, moral objectivity, and I believe in creation and intelligent design. So yeah.
Okay, so are you like Christian?
I wouldn't say I strictly adhere to like the Bible or any doctrine like that, but maybe like something between Christian and Buddhist. I don't know. I believe in. I'm not an atheist, I guess.
What would you say, like, your moral, because you said there's objective morality, like, where do you get your, like, objective morality from? And, you know, do you think your objective, you know, perception of morality should be applied to other people with different morality?
Well, I guess
objective morality is like, don't fucking kill people, don't rape people, don't, you know, like, I feel like that is something regardless. That's like, for me, that's how I understand objective morality. But
well, I guess because it's like everything's. Wait,
sorry,
what's that?
Michelle?
Can I ask you something, Ruby?
Yeah, of course.
So, I guess personally, where do you find happiness? How do you have? Because I kind of think that the purpose of living is to find a sort of connection to something. And that's how we find our purpose, and that's how we like have a reason to get up every day.
Yeah.
Where do you find your happiness? Like after, like earlier you mentioned that, you know, sometimes people have their jobs and, you know, they just do their jobs and maybe they don't find happiness from those avenues. But how about for you personally? What makes you get up the next day and find connection and happiness?
Well, it's definitely, you know, it's a connection with, I'm very close with my family. I talk to my mom every day. I'm very close with my friends. You know, and I've been involved in like activism and trying to give back to the community, you know, and, you know, my dog makes me happy. So, you know, all the kind of the usual suspects, that kind of stuff.
And I guess,
you know,
kind of tying back to the OnlyFans, like those things that you're getting, it's not purchased, it's authentic, right? So I guess I don't know what I'm trying to get at this, but
Do you, okay, Ruby, I feel like I asked this before, but I want to see if we can, I forgot what you answered, actually. Do you think that everything is up for commodification? If there
Yeah.
is no objective morality, is everything up to the market?
Well, I think that society should collectively create societal and economic structures that serve a purpose higher than profit, and that purpose should be collective well-being. No, this isn't.
That's
You're putting your hands up,
objectivity.
Michael. No,
A purpose
No!
higher. Yes, that's exactly right.
no. People create it. Like, say I live in a house with a
Yes,
bunch
we
of
do.
people.
You're right. Wait,
No, you're-
Ruby, you're right. I agree with you.
Yo, like,
Okay, finish what you're saying. Go for it. Finish what you're saying.
no, because you just jumped up and down randomly.
Because that
you
was
didn't
so.
get a
Because you
dunk on
so
me.
said what I wanted you to say.
No, because
Okay.
all right, I don't know if you have a different idea of like objective versus subjective. You know, like objective. Like, do you think it's like, because you could say like there's things that like exist. You know, ideas that exist. You know, that are like malleable and changeable. They're not like objective. You know, it's like something that's constructed. Like you could say like a $10 bill like objectively is worth $10, and in a way that makes sense. But you know, we are the ones who put that value on it, and we create that value. So for me, it's still subjective, but it's becomes objective by the decision making of the collective that agrees to use that tool.
Yes.
Nope, you're not getting a point on this. I'm not saying
No,
that there's
you're
objective.
totally right. Look, what you're saying, what I'm saying, might as well be the same thing. This is why I don't get caught up in religion or like all this bullshit, because what you're saying is basically we create the objective morality, and I'm saying yes. So therefore, would society be better if we all believed, or if there was a commonly held belief in objective morality, or if everybody was just left to their own devices and we had moral relativism?
I think you're misunderstanding like my interpretation of objective versus subjective. Just because a group of people decides that a certain social tradition will serve them and benefit them as a group doesn't mean that all of a sudden that's like an objective, you know, fact. It can still change, just like in our culture, our laws and, you know, our morality is constantly changing, you know, because it is relative and subjective. You know, it was considered objectively totally like a-okay to like enslave people like 100 years ago. There's all kinds of things, but
Right,
you know, those
so-
were perceived as objective by the collective, but doesn't mean like you act like objective is like there's this like, you know, this like doctrine of like what is objectively moral or immoral, you know. So I don't.
No, I'm not referencing a doctrine. So,
But when you say objective, you know, like
okay, let me explain. So,
I don't, you know.
do you think you might think we're these super rational creatures, humans?
I
but-
don't. I
Okay,
don't.
then you don't. Okay, then you already know that we operate based on beliefs and experience. Right?
But yeah, and reason, yes.
So if we believe something is objective, we'll operate in such a way that that there's an objective thing. So in other words, let's go to the slavery. I'm glad you brought that up. Slavery is more than a commodification. It's a owning of property. It's making human beings property. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, I'm not trying to equate your argument to this, because that's obviously not what you're saying, but let's say somebody back when slavery was more, there is still slavery in the world now, actually, by the way.
Yeah,
we don't even
yeah.
have to go back in time. So
Yeah.
the slavery that's going on in Syria right now, can't somebody make the argument that, well, you know, I think it's wrong. I think slavery is wrong, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to tell someone that they can't commodify that or they can't put a price on humans. That's obviously an extreme level, right? But like, what I'm saying is, what is stopping us from getting there if we don't have moral objectivity at some point?
Well, see, that is the extreme of moral relativism. You know, is that and anyone's morality is completely subjective, but the reality is, you know, for me, like I believe in like that our ideas of morality are something we evolved as a means of functioning better in a social group. So it exists in that sense, but it's incredibly malleable. But you can withdraw certain themes. It doesn't mean they're objective, but the most basic theme, you know, my like most fundamental moral axiom is you want to try to increase well-being and reduce suffering, you know, and
Okay. Okay. Great.
The
great.
the
Park
means
right
of which
there.
that is like, you know.
All right. Perfect. So if OnlyFans is ultimately making men more lonely, let's just say that's the end result, that more men are lonely because their market value is decreased. And women, and the women who are doing it also, let's say they have some negative side effects. They feel more objectified. They don't feel like they're developing skills in life. They feel superficial, whatever negatives that come with that, psychological negatives, which, by the way, I've interviewed many women who have told, and talked with many women who have told me as such from their time in sex work, or not OnlyFans, but like, not quite prostitution either, just different online kind of avenues like that, that they have felt objectified. They felt emotionally scarred. They have to see a therapist. So it's like, I'm seeing on both sides, there's these negatives coming out. Of course, that's not the whole picture, sure. But, I mean, what are the positives coming out? More money being generated. That's like the only...
Well, it's like you could say the positives... The positive, well, unfortunately, like in our current like economy and like the way that we exist, unfortunately, that we do have to commodify our labor and our skills in order to, you know, survive within this, you know, societal structure and economy. But so the thing is, it's like with OnlyFans, like you highlight like the most negative, but the positives would be, it's like, for me, it's more of like a moral thing. It's not like there's negatives in the industry, which I think we should focus on reforming that. The positives are people like sex, they like feeling good, and they like money. So these two things, that's the most positive basic interaction of it, is when that's mutually just like if you buy a candy bar, you know, it's not like the most meaningful thing in the world, you know, but it's still, it's not this like intrinsic like evil thing, you know.
I agree. So in that same vein, I'm not even talking about necessarily intrinsic. I'm talking about results. Like with candy bars, okay. The accessibility of processed sugar in all of our foods, at least in America, has no doubt contributed to the, what is it, like 1 in 3 obese Americans, heart disease, all these issues.
Yes. Hold that thought.
Okay.
Yes, and that's exactly the issues that we have with the sugar industry and those fast food industries. I feel like it's a parallel to how the porn industry functions, you know, where it's like a lot of the worst aspects of it are highlighted, and it's, you know, the marketing's manipulative and all of this stuff. There's all that bad stuff in it, but does that mean that intrinsically eating a sweet treat, you know, is problematic, you know?
No.
Amy, I want you to weigh in.
Yeah. Oh, you're muted.
You're muted.
Sorry.
No,
I think that, okay, I got to say something about from a female perspective, that this again, we're coming back to like really individualistic. It's like, well, in my experience and the way I experience it, or the way my friends experience it, that has ramifications beyond the individual experience. And that if you're portraying women and romantic or sexual relationships in a way that is very one-sided and very much like this, that has flow-on effects, like 100%. So commodifying intimacy, like commodifying experience, like the one thing that makes us human. And that happens across the board. That's not just on OnlyFans. That's Facebook, Instagram, every single social media platform that you engage with is commodifying the absolute like core trait of humanity, which is like interpersonal and personal experience. But does that not, like, reifying personal experience, and particularly with intimacy, I think like bringing it down to moral or amoral or immoral is maybe not very productive, because like you say, Ruby, people are going to have different perceptions of that. Like, I disagree with sex work, prostitution, online sex work, whatever it is, because I think there is inherently something wrong with putting a monetary value on those really intimate and really important human experiences. I think that it like fucks us really badly in our brains and makes it hard for us to enjoy, engage, and like have meaningful relationships with other people. I don't think there is anything amoral with being a sex worker or immoral with being a sex worker. I don't think morality really plays into it for me. Yeah, I guess. Michelle, what do you think?
I agree with everything you just said. It's kind of hard because I think each of you brings such an important perspective in all of this. I guess my overall take is using sex work as a primary way to attain a sort of intimacy or strong personal relationship would be horrible. But using it, I guess, as I don't know, not being dependent on it, I think.
Is the problem here a lack of education in the people who are producing and consuming it? Like, do we need, is it a media literacy issue that we're having a conversation about? Like, do people need to know the boundaries between what is real and what is not? And
absolutely.
Yeah, because most often they're being sold a sort of fantasy, like you were saying, and I guess when you're exposed and that's the only thing that you've ever been exposed to, it's hard to distinguish what is fantasy and what's real, and it would be hard to translate that in real life. And
so to that point, well, I guess about the whole real versus not real public education, again, I see that as like tied to the exact same thing that I'm saying, because if everything is relative, right, then who are you to tell someone what is or isn't more real to them? Who are you to value what is real and what is not real? And I know that sounds absurd, but it's like, especially as things get more and more accurate, become more and more accurate simulations of real life, and even if you're just talking about real life itself, the education has to be informed by some sort of philosophy, by some sort of outlook of things. It's not like science. It's not just science, of course. So what I'm saying is you're right. Like part of that is the conversation and the conversation we're having. And I find it interesting that, if I'm not mistaken, all of you individually are personally against. You wouldn't want to be in that industry. You don't think it's healthy for you, right? Or wrong?
I wouldn't say that for myself. You know, currently, like, I'm curious what your thought is. Like, I am an art model now, which is funny because I do nude art modeling. It's completely non-sexual. I go up in front of a class, I'm naked, I stand really still for 3 hours. Would you think that's objectifying, Glink? I'm just curious.
It's depend. I mean, I don't know. How do you feel about it?
I found a different way to get paid to be naked. That's more like wholesome.
I don't even think, honestly, I don't think that's like even anywhere near the being naked in like a pornographic setting. Like an examination of the shape and form of the female body in a non-sexual way is really fucking super important. Because you have flaws. They're going to draw your little roles. They're going to like draw you in your cellulite. Like they're looking at a real woman and analyzing you non-sexually. Like, I don't even think you can really compare that. That is contributing to, that is like cultural. That is a cultural contribution of nudity, which like bolsters something that is beyond the capitalist sort of ideation of women and sexuality.
Okay,
you know, like
I think I have a good analogy here. I'm going to ask all of you individually, or you guys can all answer in your own capacity. Ruby, if you were to have kids, I'm not saying you want to have kids or whatever.
Why? But I want my daughter to be a stripper.
Okay, yeah, you would have certain values that you raise your daughter
Just waiting
with,
for it.
right?
I would raise my daughter to be a good person, you know, who wants to not have a negative impact on the world, who values other people and does the best that she can in this fucked up world that we live in.
Okay, Amy, would you have any problems with your daughter being the equivalent of OnlyFans if you had one?
To be perfectly honest, like the way I feel about that industry and being overtly sexual on the internet for attention or for money, I don't want to have children because that thought really terrifies me and upsets me. I would like
The thought of
my
them being
child
attracted to that.
I would be so, and that is not a passing judgment on people who do decide to do this. Like, and this is where my own personal morality comes into it. I would be fucking devastated if she was like wanted to be a fucking biologist, checkout chick at Coles or whatever. Like whatever. I don't care. But I think that personally, I think there's so much women are put in this situation, in this position where if you are attractive, then you aren't pushed by other forces to explore your intellect, to explore your wit, to explore your value as a human being outside of your physicality. And I think that the internet, the aesthetics of the internet, this visually charged environment has created an environment for women where it's like you can rely on that basically. And I would hate for my daughter to feel the pressure of having to rely on that. Fucking eating disorders skyrocketing, plastic surgery, all these things that it goes beyond even just the sex work stuff. It's huge, but this is why I just won't have children.
Michelle?
Safe bet. I mean, for me, I don't see it as like any worse. Like, so say if my daughter, the thing is, of course, I'd want my daughter to pursue being like in this industry is not a long-term thing to pursue, you know, and there's a lot of exploitation within the industry, you know. But if my daughter did choose to do that, I don't see anything morally wrong with it. I wouldn't like to, on an incest level, think about my daughter doing sex stuff, you know. I wouldn't want to think about her fucking period, you know. That would be like a little icky to me, just, you know, on an incest aversion level. But if, you know, if my child did that and they truly were doing it and happy and healthy doing it and not doing it for being externally pressured, and if they were doing it, say, as a stepping stone to pay for school or to put a down payment on a house, I would be fine with that, you know. And even if I wasn't, I would not then choose to like stigmatize my child. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
Michelle.
I think there's some. Yeah.
It's okay. I was totally just enjoying all of these conversations. Don't worry about it. I gravitate more towards Amy's side. Like everything that you said, I 100% agree. I guess a little bit concerned or very concerned if my child came up to me, thought that their looks are what they should be worrying about and not finding other avenues where they could feel empowered and just facing that sort of pressure. It's just, and that industry, I feel like it's short-term happiness, but long-term negative side effects.
Yeah.
I don't think it has negative side effects on everyone. You know what I mean?
Nothing
But
has negative side effects.
for
on
me,
everyone.
I see it as like, say, like, if my daughter wanted to be a Victoria's Secret model, you know, that's the same thing. You know, it's not vastly different to me. You know, it's like, sure, if you want to do that, you know, I guess go do that, but just know this isn't really gonna be a long-term thing, and also don't put all of your, you know, value in your appearance, you know, because it's very fleeting. But at the same time, I don't see it intrinsically wrong to capitalize, you know, on, you know, if you're lucky enough to be like 6 feet tall and look like a model, you know, go for it and, you know, make the most of it. Just like if you're a guy who's like super strong and athletic, you know, I guess go, you know, do basketball for 10 years or whatever, and then have like other plans.
Before we get there, even, I want to make one point, which is, Michelle, you would be averse to your daughter doing that. You wouldn't want that as an outcome. And Amy, part of the reason you don't even want kids is because you recognize that the world is so flawed and so fucked up that could happen, and you don't want that to happen. And I'm saying you create the world you want to live in. As a society, we create the world we want to live in. So in the same way that, you know, you want your household to be a certain way, and this is to an extent, obviously, you wouldn't impose the same exact values you would on a family on society, but there are things that I believe run on the foundational level that we can apply to both. That things that work for your family, some things will work for society, and vice versa. And that's living. That's two things again, like the collective and the individual living in harmony with each other. And I think I'm just taking it a step further than Amy and Michelle. And again, I'll get to what Ruby's saying in a minute. And I'm saying not only would I not want my daughter to grow up that way, I also don't think other people's daughters should have to grow up that way. I think there's better things to value. And that is how we shape the society that we live in. It's not this arbitrary thing that we have no control over. We as people have immense power in the say of the conversation. Do you get what I'm saying? Like just think of the society as a big family.
Agree. This is the reason that I do the research that I do and have dedicated my own career trajectory to raising critical opinions about the feminist movement as it stands today, because I think it could be better. I think we could be doing better. Like, I definitely 100% agree with what you're saying. And I think that's the point that that's the reason we're all here having this conversation.
This is part of it.
To push the narrative, keep pushing the narrative forward. Like, okay, we've come to these understandings and yeah.
So I think a critical difference is like, instead of stigmatizing something that, maybe it's not great for young girls to want to like aspire to be a model, but for me, it's like, instead of stigmatizing the model, I would like for young, to create like a positive influence and use encouragement. So Glink, when you talk about like, we shouldn't normalize it, like, do you see how things are operating today? There's like a huge backlash against sex workers that's extremely toxic, and individual sex workers are targeted, they're doxxed, their addresses are leaked, their content is stolen, they are shit on like on a massive scale. That's what stigmatization looks like right now. It's actively harming a very vulnerable, like, generally a lot of people in the industry are more vulnerable. Like, they're not the people who came up and like could have gone to an Ivy League school if they were on that path. They obviously didn't have access to that path, Yeah. So, like, what kind of, like, wouldn't it be better to focus on like creating more a positive influence instead of being like, oh, we should be like very critical of like specific sites like OnlyFans, and do you know what I mean? Like, and also what do you say, like, what's like the opposite of normalizing? Like, how would you go about enforcing like a level of shame and like being like, this is wrong? Like, how could you do that without actively harming like sex workers?
I guess what I'm trying to say is that I agree with you. It's almost like I want to meet in the middle, because I agree with you that individuals should not be targeted or harassed, but I'm also against promoting that line of career choice. So for me, it's almost like we don't want to target and harass them, but let's reach a point where this is something that maybe
you don't want to glorify it either.
Yeah. And this is why I'm having you guys on, by the way, actually, because maybe in some ways women need to lead the conversation. Whereas men typically lead the conversation in a lot of societal things, maybe this is one area where women need to take the stand. Because it's like, a lot of the times, even myself, I think, some people could see what I'm saying or doing and be like, oh, he's an incel talk. And in a way, there's stigmatization going on both sides. If a man has any complaints about the sexual like landscape, for lack of a better term, that we live in, they're viewed as like a bigot, misogynist incel immediately by certain groups. And then on the other hand, if a woman is like,
they're labeled as a swerf,
like
sex worker.
If a woman is wearing a tank top,
they're cancelled. Like, I probably, if I had social media,
it's self-canceled.
I'd be cancelled. Might be cancelled.
Yeah, and like, but even to your point, Ruby, like, again, I also think the equivalent for that is like a woman who's wearing a tank top and gets catcalled or something. Like, that's the other extreme stigmatization. It's like, no, she's not a, like a whore just because she's wearing a tank top and walking down the street. You know what I mean? Like, you shouldn't treat her like that because of that. You know what I mean? Just like you shouldn't treat the guy who's maybe frustrated and lonely and confused and like doesn't have anyone to talk to and is like trying to figure out, make sense of all this shit, and they're just being told you can purchase fake sexual intimacy and watch porn, and that's all you have to do, and women are worth way more than you as a market value.
Or women are only just a commodity to purchase.
Yes,
Is the other thing that comes
Yeah.
from that is
think-
like how you start.
these things are related. Like, this is a point I want to make.
Yeah,
I think men who treat women like shit partially or maybe mostly stems, it's like, how do I say this? I have to word this carefully because this could sound very wrong,
God.
but trust me, it's a
Bring
it's a
it
nuanced.
on.
All right, so
I'm joking.
the men who objectify women, I would wager, are informed by having their life experiences, having viewed women as objects. And
Yeah.
to me, the most obvious area of that, at least currently, is something like porn, for example.
Yeah.
You're conditioning your brain every night that if you jack off every night, like a lot of men do, to this doesn't matter who this woman is, doesn't matter who she is, how she feels, any of that. She's an object for me to get sexually aroused, jerk off, come and go to bed, and that's it. And if you're conditioned to view women that way, and maybe you don't even have friends in real life that are girls or interact with girls in real life, you're gonna act like a piece of shit to women because you're conditioned to. And I'm not saying that as a justification, mind you. I'm not
No,
saying
I completely agree. This is a really significant point, and I think it comes back to that, like, yes, we should support individual women's rights to do whatever they want, but that only really goes so far because each individual woman who engages in this kind of activity creates an environment where women are objectified and that objectification of women is normalized. So these young men who aren't very good with women, can't approach them, don't know that they are actually real people with feelings and, all of these kinds of things. It works both ways because then women start to view themselves as objects as well. So,
and they feel victimized, justifiably so.
I wouldn't even, I'm not even saying like it's a victim, like a process of victimization. I think it's like I objectify myself all of the time, and I put so much worth on my physical appearance when I know I've got these like these other parts of myself that have way more intrinsic value than my physical appearance. But socially, again, this huge issue of the way that the object of the human woman is portrayed in the media, all of this kind of thing. It fucking gets in your head. Like I'm a feminist. I don't need makeup. But I'm like, oh my God, I'm ugly, I'm fat, I'm this, I'm that, still it gets in your head. Same with men, I'm sure. But
That you don't have any social media, because I feel like the more social media you have, the more of the reminders of those, like the more triggered you make.
I actually had to get rid of all my social media like 5-6 years ago because it was doing a
good
number
for
on
you.
me.
Yeah.
I recently got
yeah.
Instagram again a couple of months ago, but
Oh,
yeah,
gosh.
I'm so
like-
proud of you.
I know that's not easy. It's like you're
Because-
disconnecting from
Mhm.
It's a big
the
step.
world.
it's so fucking nice. It's really nice.
I know. I just joined Twitter like a month ago, and I already just feel like it's just this toxic thing that just calls to me constantly. Like constantly, like ever since I got Twitter, I don't even think I've been watching TV shows, because I'm just so like, just in
Oh.
that. It's like, my attention span is just like non-existent. It's not.
Mhm.
Guys, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I gotta go. I just want to say thank you for inviting me. I know I've been super quiet, first time doing something like this, and just know that I think I learned a lot today, and thank you for sharing all your stories. And yeah, I think it's been very productive.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you
Thank
for coming
you
on.
so
You
much.
did great. You're like a pro.
Thanks for coming on the show. I
No.
appreciate
Yeah,
it.
absolutely. All
No.
that.
We will keep in touch, okay?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, have a good night, guys.
Take
All
care.
right. Good night.
Bye.
So, I guess what my overarching point with this whole thing is, when Amy is talking about the onus on men who are kind of reducing themselves in a way to viewing these things and getting pleasure out of it, which is like 100% part of the equation. I view it as men and women in a good society, the society I want, should cooperate with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so when it comes to women being objectified, it's 100% without a doubt part of the onus on men. But that doesn't come from nowhere. And I know that sounds harsh to say, but women play a role in objectifying themselves too, not on an individual level, but on a societal level. Like
Totally.
And men.
But ultimately, it's like capitalizing a normal thing, which is that a male human person is going to see a woman and be attracted by that and want to pursue that to make babies.
Yeah.
So then that gets blown into this thing where now we've got taken the humanity out of it, and I think that's also why we're just getting further and further apart. And it's like, so
Yes.
men versus women, or you're a feminist or you're not a feminist, or you're
You're
this
an
or you're
incel
that.
or a feminist. It's like,
Yeah, exactly. Like,
and also on the other side of that coin, I want to mention, with men being addicted to porn, again, like part of the problem of men being addicted to porn is women's role in that, but also it's men's role in that. So it's not a one-sided thing where it's like, oh, that's just your fault or that's just your fault. It's like we're both playing a role in perpetuating these things.
totally. It's super unproductive to think about it as anyone's fault, I think.
Mm-hmm.
It's like something that has really evolved over like pretty much the entirety of human history.
Yeah.
That is now just like in the last, I guess since the advent of the internet, it's just morphed into this really fucking crazy and weird thing that we don't even get. Like, you look at research, the research that comes out is literally from like studies that were done last year or the year before. What fucking how much changes on the internet in a year?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Yeah.
there's the only real research on OnlyFans that I could find was like mainly in looking at gay pornography on OnlyFans. Like, there isn't really even studies yet on any of this. So, like, from a male-female perspective. So it moves so fast that we're just like sort of at the mercy of time
Yeah.
in a bit.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, these are all, like, very valid issues. I don't even disagree with you guys on most of it. It's just, like, I'm seeing this more as, like, a broader issue of the internet. Like, I'm curious for either of you, do you think there's something intrinsically wrong with, like, filming yourself having sex and then someone else watching it?
I would never do that personally, but
Mhm.
I would.
Do you think it's yeah? But
So
if
yeah.
someone else did it, though, do you think there's something like intrinsically wrong or like immoral about it if it's all consensual?
No, I see. This is
I don't view it. I'm not even viewing it that way. I view it as like, what are the impacts of this on this scale? I guess, and how do we keep the scales from being completely out of our control? And I think having some control, or at least having some understanding, like it starts with understanding. You know, I'm not going to say I have all the answers right now immediately of the prescriptive answers, but we have to start by coming together in a way and realizing that it's not about one side of the equation. It's not because men are these horrible creatures. It's not because women are these, selfish, they just want to make money. There's all these forces at play here. But I think first thing for me is acknowledging that what is the end result of this? And from my estimation, it seems like the end result of the pervasiveness of pornography, certainly, and probably online sex work as well, is just not good for either party, either side in the long term, men and women. So it's to both of their interests for us to get a sort of understanding of this and why this is happening, and understanding of each other. And this is
But
part
like,
of that.
if you, well, like, I'm curious if someone like is using pornography like in moderation, because we're talking about like the extreme negative effects, that are definitely an issue, but I don't think that's representative of like everyone. Like, I watch porn sometimes, and I'm fine.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of guys who watch porn and are feminist and completely respect women and have healthy relationships. So
I don't think being a feminist is necessarily. I don't think
necessarily what.
I don't think being a man and being a feminist is necessarily indicative of you having the best intentions all the time. I think a lot of men try to posture as feminists and like super pro ally because they're at the end of the day
They
trying
want
to
to
get laid.
get pussy.
Yeah,
No,
I really believe that.
exists. That totally exists. You know, there's shitty dudes, and those shitty. I've known people like that. Trust me, there's just like the cringiest shit. You know, and you could tell by their demeanor and the way they speak about things that they don't actually give a fuck. It's very obvious. You know, at least for me. You know, and like other people I know, but I don't view most male feminists in that regard. You know, I view that I think it's a pretty logical conclusion to come to, like, hey, I think men and women should have like equal rights in society and equal rights under the law, and that we should work to reduce social discrimination. Like, for me, I think I have faith in men that they could just morally want that, you know, without wanting to like
I think most
posture.
men do. I think that there is like such a tiny little
I want that, but
minority.
I would never call myself a feminist because that label, especially when it comes to men, like every male feminist I've ever encountered or seen online has been like some super extreme overcompensating cuck, for lack of a better term. I'm sorry, but it's just like they're not reasonable with their views. I'm sorry, not from what I've seen, but maybe I'm wrong. I could be wrong. I could be limited.
I feel like it's like even the word feminism and being a feminist, like that means something to me that is completely different than I'm sure what it means to you, Ruby. And, you know, like when you're just like taking this carbon copy of like feminism, like women should have hairy legs, like something like this, whatever it is, like that's not really it. That's not like, for me, my feminism is about looking at stuff in society through a feminist lens. Like, okay, how does this impact women? I'm interested in that because I'm a woman, you know, like, yeah. If you're loud about anything on the internet, you're probably a fucking douchebag. Doesn't matter if it's feminism or like conservative politics.
Any ideology.
Yeah.
Political discourse online is insane. Like sometimes I just take a step back. This is why like I got into YouTube, because I'm just fascinated with like this sociological phenomena of just like constant outrage, like constant just like dehumanizing people. Like, you know, if you say like one remotely offbeat thing, it's like you are no longer human, you should be shunned. Like it's insane, you know. Or
and
even
the thing is that gets me about this is that it is so fucking profitable. Like, you're not going to leave a conversation. You're not going to say your piece and just leave a conversation if you're upset. You're going to be fucking on there, like, just go, like, in consuming, spending your time, inputting your data. That data gets sold on. Like, they're literally, these platforms are designed for you to use them to make money for the people who own them. Yeah. Like, so all of this shit, all this hyper-partisan divide in America, this ideological divide across the internet, pretty much in every fucking corner of the internet, is like how much of that would exist if we had a different internet, a different, less commodified, less corporatized internet. Maybe a question for another day.
You know,
but
that's the big. So for me, that is like the prime issue that, you know, bleeds into like the issues in like online pornography. It's basically more of like the root issue of how the internet operates, you know, and how it's, you know, it's designed to be addictive. Porn's designed to be addictive. Social media is designed to be addictive. News is designed, you know, to be clickbait that outrages you. You know, it's going to be the most outrageous thing. You know, that's unfortunately like what's prevailing on the internet. You know, so that's why instead of focusing on like, you know, how it manifests in sex work, I tend to try to like see like as a broader like what on earth can we do to like contain this general trend, you know, of like really letting algorithms kind of dictate and like exploit our addictions, you know.
And it comes down to, I think this whole conversation is really a matter of like who benefits from porn addiction. Is it men? Is it women? No, it's the companies that own the websites. It's OnlyFans as a corporation benefits from OnlyFans.
That's true.
At the end of the day. So like yeah, I guess that we are kind of talking about power, and if that's the point, then the issue is not with even really at this. It goes so much higher, I guess, to
Yeah.
the invisible people who are sitting in their offices, like.
And to that point, I want to say that I think there is, if more people could have a sort of discussion about these things and understand these things critically, and maybe, not even that we have everything figured out, but the fact that we're just reaching this level of discourse, right, is something significant. I think we could just be on
Totally.
Twitter calling each other names, like who knows what percentage
Incel
of people.
Glink. Yeah.
Right. And so my point is that like we play a role in the type of discourse that's happening. And if more people thought this way, we would be holding corporations accountable. We would be holding these sort of super reductionist, commodified ways of viewing people. Like, for example, people's data. Like, social media will use all these tricks to keep your attention tied to them because your data is valuable. And what is data? Data is just some sort of
Human experience.
Yeah, it's just reducing human experience to numbers and data and whatever. So I guess what I'm saying is having these kinds of conversations is the first major step to even playing a role in how we shape our society, because it's not an arbitrary thing that we have no control over. We do have control over.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And the fact
Yeah.
that we can have conversations with each other from different perspectives, groundbreaking.
Definitely.
Fucking groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's
know,
very
it's
heartwarming
really
when people are cordially interact. Since I started, I've only been interacting with people on the right, but it's so nice, when I feel like we're actually communicating, and I'm
Yeah.
not just a caricature of an evil feminist, and all of those stereotypes and whatnot.
Yeah.
Because people do fundamentally kind of want the same thing. They want a society where people are happier and flourish, so
Yeah.
we're gonna have to get out of this deadlock that we're in right now. That's even in the United States government, we can't pass a bill, because we're just
Yeah.
completely deadlocked on each team not willing to communicate.
We're making
so.
this shit a part of your identity instead of actually engaging with policy or thinking, oh, maybe that, I'm going to vote on not my heart, but my head.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a lot of work to do.
Well, on that note, ladies, I think, I'm sure we could go on for many hours, but I think that's a good stopping point for this stream.
Yeah.
I very much appreciate having you guys on. I think let's do some closing statements, maybe, just because I feel like if you guys wanted to say anything or give a stance at the end. Ruby, why don't you?
Closing statement.
Just where you stand after all this, or what you feel like you've learned, if anything, or I don't know.
Yeah, so for me, it's I'm pretty solid in some of my philosophical interpretations of sex work and stuff, but I am more malleable and willing to kind of waver on the social and the way it manifests in capitalism, and what level of encouragement do we want towards this. So there's so it's good to have these conversations, because I'm still kind of feeling out my perspective on that, because it's super complicated, so yeah, it's nice chatting with you guys. Thanks for inviting me on, and it was nice to meet you, Amy.
Really nice to meet you too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
Amy?
I feel very much the same. I feel the kind of good feeling you have after a good conversation, which is a nice way to
Aw.
continue on into my day. So, yeah.
Oh
just
yeah,
really
you still have a
appreciate-
day ahead of you. That's so
It's only
weird.
2 p.m. I gotta go back. to
What?
work.
It's midnight. It's midnight here. This is late time. Wow.
Sun's shining.
I know. It's
Um,
trippy.
Yeah, it's very strange. But yeah, really, really appreciate the opportunity to come and chat with you guys. It's been great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, guys. I'll catch you later.
Okie doke. See See ya.
Good night. Goodbye, chat.
I think you guys know where I stand. I mean, I think philosophically. See, it's funny because Ruby. I think Ruby. I didn't want to say this there because I feel like it would have incited further discussion. I wanted to kind of leave things on a cap, but Ruby is like, she's partially there. I just feel like beneath what she's saying about the capitalism and the market and the, you know, these kinds of things, I think below that is the philosophical, like what informs whether we value the market or how we value the market. The market should serve us. You know what I mean? Should serve our foundation. And it's a very complicated issue for me to make sense of. So excuse me if I'm not making total sense, but I do think using analogies makes sense. It's like, you know, you have a family. To have a good family, to have raised kids properly, you need certain values, right? You need certain values instilled. And I think not the exact same values, but on some level, values need to be instilled in society on a, you know, collective level if we want to create a good society, right? Like, is there any flaw in my logic there?